All right, what's going on, guys? It's Trader here, and I'm joined for the first time on the Gridiron Hogs podcast by Jackson Collier and Daniel Fair of HawgBeat.com. This is the HawgBeat.com football podcast. The usual faces, Mason Choate, Robert Stewart, not here today. They're on their way to Starkville for the game, but we've got you covered with our kind of BetSaracen breakdown episode, talking about the lines, talking about our final thoughts on the game, as well as looking at a couple player props. A little bit dry this week, but we are getting them from our sponsor, BetSaracen. BetSaracen is the mobile sports gambling app for the Saracen Casino Resort. It features mobile options to place bets on your favorite sports and teams, including the Razorbacks. Each week, HawgBeat will feature a story and a podcast highlighting the lines, odds, player props, and favorable picks for Saturday's game. So this week, Arkansas 9.5-point underdogs to Mississippi State. I guess just starting with your guys' initial reactions on that, I'll start with Daniel.
I mean, I'm not in the least bit surprised. I kind of thought the line was going to be a little bit higher. It's kind of the perfect storm for Mike Leach to get his first win against Sam Pittman. You got Arkansas secondaries 124th in the country in passing yards, and you got a guy in Will Rogers who's already thrown for almost 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. I think Arkansas is going to lose this one. I don't think that they're going to have a lead at any point in the game. I think my HawgBeat.com prediction was 49-35. I just don't think we're going to be able to stop the passing game. I think we'll be able to gash them on the ground. I think that Arkansas is going to have a lot of yards on the ground. I don't see them being able to slow down Will Rogers and company.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that same boat with you. I have 41-17 as my prediction. That'll be going up on HawgBeat.com tomorrow. It'll also have Mason and Robert's prediction as well as Jackson. But I listen, we all saw what happened to KJ last week. None of us think that he's going to play. And that's kind of been the growing consensus over the last couple of days. Like you said, Daniel, I'm actually kind of surprised the line hasn't trended further away from Arkansas, given the fact that they're going to be missing their starting quarterback in this one. From everything I can gather at this point, you do have an experienced guy in Cade Fortin, and you have a really talented kid behind him in Malik Hornsby that's very fast, does some strange things from the quarterback position, but neither of them are really proven. I would have expected to see this line go further away. Jackson, another interesting note in this game, the total is set right now at 58.5. That really hasn't shifted over the last couple of days. Why don't you go ahead and give kind of what your prediction's looking like, as well as what you think of that total and then the spread of the game?
So I guess my prediction was 38-27 Mississippi State, maybe a little bit lower scoring than y'all, maybe a little bit closer than y'all. But I still don't think it's necessarily going to be a game Arkansas wins. 58.5. It's not a ton of points, especially for a team like Mississippi State. Just put up 42 points, I believe, against Texas A&M. Arkansas pretty much has scored 30 plus points every single game this year, outside of they were a fumble away from doing that, and a muffed or a bad snap and missed field goal against A&M from doing that, just some kind of minor errors. And then Alabama, again, just turnovers, whether that's in the red zone or kicking field goals, whatever. The offense has moved the ball, whether they haven't necessarily finished when they could have, but I think the over is pretty relatively easily going to hit. Just knowing the way that Arkansas will probably be able to gash on the ground, like Daniel said. And then Mississippi State's going to move the ball. They're going to score. Wouldn't be surprised if, Will Rogers is going to be able to pick apart the defense, probably nickel and dime for a little bit. He'll have his fair share of deep shots. Cincinnati and Texas A&M and South Carolina all had deep shots on Arkansas too. A lot of those ended up being overthrown balls, kind of misplaced balls, all that sort of stuff. I just don't think it's going to be necessarily close. I'm looking for maybe a late Arkansas touchdown to bring it to 11, to that 38-27 total, but still don't think that Arkansas is necessarily in. I think Mississippi covers their 9.5.
Yeah, so I think all of us are kind of on the same page there. I don't think this one's really going to be close. I came into in our preseason prediction story we did, I had Arkansas losing this game, and it was one that, I understand. I thought Mississippi State was the better team coming into this game both the previous years that Sam Pittman was here. I was kind of surprised to see Arkansas pull out the win in both of those years. This year, I wasn't expecting them to do it, and I've only seen things that kind of reinforce that belief for me. The secondary for Arkansas looks terrible right now, and you've got guys injured, so that does make sense. But they're a bottom 10 pass defense in terms of total pass defense or yardage per game. And then Mississippi State's also a top 10 passing offense. I understand they're the air raid, but it goes directly against what Arkansas's strength is. So I'm really expecting Will Rogers to kind of dominate this game. One thing that's kind of interesting, though, and I love that the staff is doing this. It's probably my favorite move that I've seen from the defensive staff so far in terms of midseason adjustments. But that's moving freshman wide receiver Sam Bakke from wide receiver to corner for at least practice. He's working with the second team. Really talented kid out of Georgia. And it at least shows that they're looking to do something, mix something up in that secondary to hopefully get the ball rolling. I don't think it's going to be enough to stop one of the premier quarterbacks in the SEC in Will Rogers and really in the country. He's been a dominant force his entire time that I've seen him, at least at Mississippi State. And I'm really expecting him to kind of take advantage of a weak spot for Arkansas. Now that we've got our game breakdown out of the way a little bit, there are some lines over at BetSaracen, who once again is sponsoring this podcast, sponsoring a story that'll be up later today over at HawgBeat.com. But they do have a couple of player props out. With the uncertainty at the quarterback position, you're not really seeing any passing props so far, any receiving props beyond what Mississippi State has to offer and one receiver. And then no defensive props at this moment. I'm expecting those to be added tomorrow at some point. But for the sake of this podcast, the only lines we have to work with are Mississippi State wide receiver Dylan Johnson with a total wide receiving yards of 27.5. I don't really know much about Johnson. If y'all do, you can stop me and talk about that a little bit. But the one that really caught my eye was Rocket Sanders. He's been kind of a force in terms of running the ball for the Razorbacks this season, leading rusher. Last week, you even had everybody back in that four-headed rotation, and he's still the guy taking the bulk of the carries, and he went over 100 yards. This week, listed at 90.5 rushing yards for his total. We'll go back to Daniel now. Daniel, what do you think about that line for Rocket Sanders, and do you think it's one that is worth, potentially taking a look at?
Yeah, so far this season, he's only come short of that once. That was against Texas A&M. Rocket Sanders is a guy you kind of want getting 20 to 25 carries a game. And Mississippi State, I think right now they're giving up 144 yards on the ground. The way I watched when Mississippi State played LSU, and the way that LSU ran away with that game was the ground game. And that's something Arkansas does really well. I do think that Rocket's going to break one, probably. I'd say probably between 50 and 70 yards. I think he's due for one of those, break away from the rest of the defense and take 1 yard. I think he's going to do that once. I'd hammer that 90 over, that 90.5 over. I just think he's due for it after a couple of weeks where he's kind of struggled. He had a really good game against Alabama, but struggling against A&M. I would take 90 for him.
Jackson, what do you think on that one?
Oh yeah, I would definitely take the 90.5 any day of the week for Rocket, especially against Mississippi State. Rocket's a guy, he's a physical runner. He hits holes relatively well. He falls forward. He fights for extra yards. And like Daniel said, I think he's due for being able to hit one of those bigger runs, one of those longer runs. The thing is, with the uncertainty at the quarterback position, thinking Cade Fortin's going to come in and start and Malik's going to be factored in there. I think Arkansas is going to have to rely on the run game a lot. Fortin's probably gotten a lot more work in practice this week than he has at any point. And he was kind of thrown to the wolves against Alabama, but wasn't too impressed with his performance against Alabama. Not sure how I feel about him being able to throw the football or at least be a threat to move the football through the air. I think he's a guy who can reliably get the ball out to his checkdowns and stuff like that. I think ultimately we're going to see Malik Hornsby in the game. And I think Arkansas is going to try to implement some like really creative run packages with Malik, with Rocket, with AJ, with DeBinion, with Dom. I think it's going to end up being a really run-oriented offensive game plan, especially if, and this is all predicated on if Fortin can't move the football through the air. I think the staff is just going to go buy in completely to the run and try to implement any number of ways they can. If that's the case, then Rocket's going to have plenty of opportunity, plenty of looks, and he's going to hit his mark easily.
Yeah, and I kind of agree there. That's really the line that I liked. I liked Rocket Sanders over rushing yards last week. I didn't give it out. I did go 2-0 on my picks. I had Rocket to score and KJ not to throw an interception. Both those hit. I would like to see a little bit more here. Like I said, touchdown scores, passing yards. I'm expecting that to come out tomorrow, and all that can be found over at BetSaracen, who once again, thank you for sponsoring this podcast. We all sound like we are on Mississippi State to cover the 9.5 points relatively easily. I know, Jackson, I think your score was the closest there, but even you said you think it's kind of a backdoor push from Arkansas late to even make it a respectable game. I want to get into just, none of us are overly high on the Hogs heading into this. I do want to talk a little bit about what Arkansas can do to really make this one a game and push Mississippi State to the brink on the road in Starkville. But before we do that, I do want to thank our friends over at myperfectfranchise.net for sponsoring this podcast as well. Huge friends of the program here at HawgBeat. They sponsor my recruiting roundup every week, as well as the Gridiron Hogs podcast. But are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career in your own hands? Or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Well, Andy Luedecke, myperfectfranchise.net can help. Andy's a longtime Rivals member and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough and free consultation process. Part of this sponsorship was we kind of went through that process with Andy, myself, and Mason. It's a really interesting, look at how to get into the franchising business. They take you, they match make with what franchise they think works best with your lifestyle and how you want to get in there and run it. And they really work with you all the way through. So all you have to do to learn more about that is call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. It's 100% free. So what do you have to lose? You can find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net, like I mentioned, or contact Andy Luedecke, aka at Andy, myperfectfranchise.net. Anytime at Aluedecke, that's ALUEDECKE at myperfectfranchise.net, or call 404-973-9901. Or once again, go to www.myperfectfranchise.net to learn more about that. Thank you again to Andy and the folks over at myperfectfranchise.net for being such big supporters of HawgBeat. Guys, none of us overly high on Arkansas in this game, but you have to think, crazier things have happened than Arkansas going into Starkville and beating a, top 25, but low end of that top 25 Mississippi State team. Jackson, I want to get your opinion first, then I'll move to Daniel, and then I'll give my thoughts at the end. What does Arkansas have to do to make this one a game and really push Mike Leach to the edge?
I think there are a few things. Number one, really establish time of possession and implement the run. If they can establish the line of scrimmage, run the football really well, win the time of possession battle, and I think that goes a long way. But then on top of that, they need to generate a couple stops and at least one turnover. I mean, that sounds like a lot, but for as bad of a mismatch as this seems to be in Mississippi State's favor, I think you're going to have a lot from an Arkansas team. And we saw that in 2020 where, they forced a couple of turnovers. They didn't win the time of possession, I think, either of the last 2 years that Arkansas has beaten Mississippi State. But I think that's more necessary to do this year. So yeah, get some stops, force at least one turnover, and you have to run the ball really, really well and be efficient in your scoring in the red zone if you get down there.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the stats. Like I said earlier, the way that LSU kind of ran away with their win over Mississippi State was on the ground. That's exactly what Arkansas is going to have to do. Like Jackson said, you're going to have to establish the run. They rushed for 207 yards on 38 attempts. They averaged 5.4 yards per carry. The way that Arkansas can keep this game close is just mostly keep the ball out of Will Rogers' hands. They throw the ball on average 43 to 46 times a game. And of those 46 attempts, I mean, he's only thrown 3 picks. He's very efficient. So the best defense is going to be to keep them off the field, just establish the run, get a few big plays. And then, like Jackson said, just force a couple turnovers, whether that's a fumble, maybe it's Dwight McLaughlin get another interception. Just bait him into a couple mistakes and then just dominate the line. That's the only thing I think they can do to keep it respectable, maybe get that back to recover.
It's going to sound cliche, guys. You can't turn the ball over and win the game, especially when you're a near double-digit underdog. Cade Fortin starting this game is not going to provide you what KJ does in terms of ability to make the defense respect his run game. At least from what I can tell, he's not the same. Not many people are, but he's not the same runner as KJ. He's not going to command that same respect from the defense. One way that he can mimic KJ is he can take care of the football. I'm not expecting to go out there and see him fumble a ton. He needs to take care of the ball, can't throw interceptions, can't make bad decisions. He's not out there to win this game for Arkansas. He's out there not to lose it for them. Has to use his veteran presence, has to take advantage where he can, but not try and force it. Like y'all said, time of possession is going to be huge in this one. You need to make sure that you have every opportunity to win this game. And I think you need to see the secondary step up. It's been a bad year for this Arkansas secondary. Like I said, bottom 10 in the country in passing yards allowed per game. And that's, taking on a Missouri State team at some point in this season. So with that a lot of times what we've seen this season, Arkansas has gotten, even in the wins, has gotten a little bit lucky that the quarterbacks are missing their throws. That's not going to happen this week with Will Rogers. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You have to keep him in check. You have to generate pressure, make him uncomfortable. They're going to get their passing yards. Don't necessarily worry about that. Don't give up touchdowns. If you can hold them to field goals, I have faith that Rocket Sanders is able to go in and this offensive line and this running back room is going to be able to get some work done. You can't give up touchdowns, especially long touchdowns. If it's a 10-play drive where they cap it in with a screen from the 5-yard line, that's something. But you can't be giving up big posts over the middle that we've seen all season. I think Dominique Bowman and Barry Odom are going to have this one at least a little bit figured out. I'm still not overly confident. I do think Mississippi State's going to run away with it, but that's where you have to start. You have to – if the secondary doesn't play at least a little bit better this week, then you might as well not even show up.
I'll add one more thing. I'm looking at this LSU Mississippi State game from week 3. Getting stops on 3rd and 4th down, absolutely huge. In that game, Mississippi State was 3 of 14 on 3rd downs, 1 of 4 on 4th downs. So getting off the field, like you said, you can't be giving up 10-play drives, but if you can get off the field consistently, keep that defense fresh, I think that's going to bode well for keeping that defense in check.
All right, so that is going to wrap it up for us here. We talked about the BetSaracen player props. Not too much out right now. I kind of would, if you're looking at the player props tomorrow, I'd kind of look at Cade Fortin not to throw an interception. I'm not sure what the juice is going to be on that. But that's one that I'm going to have my eye on, as well as what we talked about. Rocket Sanders over 90.5 rushing yards. We all felt pretty comfortable about that. As well as Mississippi State, to cover the 9.5 point spread. We all had our scores around the 58.5 point total. I don't necessarily feel comfortable giving that out. I do think it's going to be, if Arkansas wants to have a chance, they're going to have to be able to match some type of scoring that Mississippi State has. I'm not quite sure how that's going to roll. And if you're a Hog fan, wanting to put your money on Arkansas, you've actually got some pretty good juice here. Not quite the same as Alabama, that can be expected, but plus 240 to win. So that's almost 2.5 to 1 on whatever you bet on Arkansas. If you bet them to win outright, if you have faith in Cade Fortin and the Hogs, that's not a terrible number to kind of risk it on. but all this comes with the kind of warning label, I guess, that gambling, it's a great thing. It's very fun whenever you're doing it responsibly. It can add to your experience, enhance that experience. If you're not doing it responsibly, it's really something that you need to get figured out. And you can do that by calling 1-800-GAMBLER if you do have a gambling problem. BetSaracen, we have no guarantees that any of this is going to hit. We looked at these props, we cover this team, we watch this team. So there is a little bit of, kind of having a feel for it, but I'm not an expert. Jackson, you're not an expert on it. Daniel, you're not an expert on it. So all that should be taken with a grain of salt, but this is just kind of how we feel about this game, how we're breaking it down. And you can find a couple more line breakdowns over at HawgBeat.com. Like I said, with that BetSaracen story, go check out Jackson's stuff. Basketball season right around the corner. Huge things coming from him. Daniel doing great covering the football team as well. So make sure you guys go check out everything at HawgBeat, my recruiting coverage. And we'll have our staff prediction out tomorrow, kind of going a little bit more in depth about why we think what we think. Thank you guys for joining us, or for joining me, I guess, so I didn't have to do this one alone. And also thank you to BetSaracen and MyPerfectFranchise.net for sponsoring the podcast and being such good friends of the program. We'll see you Monday. Game time, 11 o'clock in Starkville. Do you have the channel that it's on? Is it ESPN?
I don't recall, actually.
Give me half a second. I can pull it up.
All right.
SEC Network.
SEC Network?
Yep.
So go check it out on the SEC Network, 11 o'clock in Starkville, Mississippi. Mason and Robert will be there, so go follow them and check out the Trough, our premium message board, for a live game thread. That is going to wrap it up for us here. I'm Alex Trader with Jackson Collier, with Daniel Fair, and I'll see you guys next time.